PBOs, we're also here because if you look at the PBO, it talks about joint collaboration and frameworks of engagement between government and the PBOs. So we are not against the meeting of government in Naivasha. We believe that was their meeting. Today we have had our meeting, which is going to continue until Sunday. And now from this point, we believe that now the government having met and as the PBOs have met, now it will be a point of us coming together. As PBOs, we are not fighting the government. And that's why we have already sent an olive branch to the government, including writing a letter to the CS Internal Security, asking him to establish a joint collaboration or joint task force between the PBOs and the government, because the act is very clear that implementing itself should be a joint collaboration. Of course, as CSRG, we have already also formed different teams among ourselves to be able to look at that particular bill or act and see which sections do we think need to be amended in future or which sections need to be aligned with the new constitution. We are also engaging with parliamentarians with a view of perhaps even pushing for an amendment bill to the section that we think are not in line with the constitution. And we have already gotten a member of parliament who we have engaged with and is really ready and waiting for the act, for us to develop those areas so that the act can be amended, can be taken to parliament. We have engaged with the Western member of parliament, Honorable Timothy Wanyonyi, who is already willing and ready to pick this bill and take it to the National Assembly. So we were here to bring our experts so that they can be able to diagnose the act and be able to advise us on the next way forward. As CSRG and as PBOs, we are saying that we are committed to working with the government to ensure that the PBO Act 2013 is fulfilled and operationalized in letter and in spirit. And we are also here to engage with the government to be able to say which sections do we think need to be amended kidogo so that it can be aligned inside with the Constitution. So we want to allay the fears that we want to fight the government. We want to tell the government that we are here to provide you with the support needed. And the President said that the government is willing to work with the sector for progress and development. And that's why we are here today for the next 3 days, so that we can come up with modalities of engaging with the government. So from next week, we hope the CS shall have seen the letter. We hope that in the next week we are going to have meetings with them so that whatever came out from this meeting and whatever came out from Naivasha, then we can bring them together to have a clear way forward. Public education or civic education is very much important because even us guys who have been in the forefront of pushing it, there are some gray areas, and that's why we are calling the experts. Now, what about the PBOs or the Mwananchi in the grassroots? And we are saying that the civic education should be facilitated and funded by government, but spearheaded by the PBOs, who are the ones who know the onset of this act and what we envisage in the first place. And in the same breath, of course, there are issues like, for example, and we have said this even in the past, in our past media addresses to you, that even as much as we are meeting the CS for internal security, we are still insisting that our place is not in the Interior Ministry. We are not a security threat. We are normal citizens. And in that engagement, we also still say that we need the operationalization of this act to be taken from the current Interior Ministry to either the Department of Devolution in the Office of the Deputy President, of course, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, or the State Law Office or the Attorney General's Office. So we are ready and we are willing, as you have seen, we have a lot of knowledge within the sector of people who can spearhead this civic education. We also have people within the sector who are qualified to be in the authority, who are qualified to be in those positions that the government is talking about.
The PBO sector, or what you call the civil society sector, is one of the biggest employers in this country. It is one sector, when we look across, we have an estimated employment of a minimum of about 70,000 Kenyans who are directly employed. We are not talking about indirect. This is also a sector that controls a huge amount of resources in the upwards of in a year, in the upwards of more than 80 billion and above. That is that this is a sector that provides a huge wide range of services. In fact, contrary to many people who think that the civil society in Kenya is about the human rights, the democracy, the governance, on the contrary, the single largest sector of the civil society is actually the civil society that's involved directly on the development and services provision. So it's a sector that we have to first understand what it is and what it is not. On the PBO Act, and what I was invited by CS Raji to come and talk about, I would urge the following. Number one, the first and the most important starting point for the government to demonstrate goodwill is to convene a no-stakeholder meeting. And this has to be convened by the cabinet secretary himself. It begins there. When the president stood on a podium at the United Nations Civil Society Convention, he did explain himself very, very clearly. He wants to have a constructive, honest engagement with civil society. And that is something we really welcomed. The CS, when he was commencing the PBO Act, was equally equivocal on that point. We now believe it is time to walk the talk. Can he convene a no-stakeholders meeting to chart the way forward in terms of implementation and operationalization of the PBO? The institutions that existed and managed the PBO before the promulgation of the PBO Act cannot be the same institutions that are going to operationalize and manage the transitions, right, and the management of implementation of the PBO Act. There has to be a radical shift and change in those institutions. What I mean is this. There has to occur a serious change in the coordination board, which is now the regulatory authority. There has to occur a major change in the NGO council, which is now the federation, right? And these changes must be done in such a participatory, consultative, and inclusive manner, because that is what the CS talked about, and we hope that when we convene this meeting, those consultations will happen. The third thing that we feel is that there are going to be a serious issue about drafting the regulations. Under Article 69 of the PBO Act, there is required to be drafted regulations. Those regulations are going to be like the real implementing tool of the Act. And therefore, those regulations must be drafted in collaboration, in participation, and in consultation with the civil society. The point we are making here is this. When media was fighting for the space on the self-regulation, civil society came in and supported media because we believed in Article 34 of the Constitution of Kenya, where media must be self-regulating, it must be independent, it must be allowed to operate. Civil society must equally be allowed that self-regulation. The PBO talks about it, but talking is one thing, actualizing is where the challenge is. And as the PS talked yesterday, the CS also talked about it, Article 36 is critical of the civil society. It talks about the right of assembly, the right of participation, the right of association, and all those. So that principle of self-regulation is very, very important to the civil society, and we stand by that. And therefore, we want to see a transitional process spearheaded by the cabinet secretary, jointly in collaboration and consultation with the civil society. And I want to urge my colleagues from the PBO sector, it is time to get up and engage. Yes. We believe that the government has the will, it has opened the door, and we must seize that opportunity and engage it. I like the way the media took the issue about self-regulation. I think time is now for civil society to take up the challenge. We have been crying for the last almost 13 years about this act. Now we have it. We must actualize it. I think when we promulgated the new constitution, one thing we said is that we have got a new chapter, a new change. We got a new country, a new republic. The civil society has a new republic. It must seize it. It must drive it. The key, anything that you do, you remember, like when we are promulgating the constitution, the Kenya government then, led by the late President Mwai Kibaki, made a fatal mistake of inviting an international criminal indictee, right? Which was a scar in our, it is when you are promulgating your new constitution, everybody was very happy, very proud. The point here is always this, when you are starting something afresh, a new republic, a new reborn, you can't start it on a wrong false start. It has to be the right way, because that sets the tone, it sets the message, it shows the goodwill, it shows it sets no doubt in mind that we are in this one with you and will be part of you. And that's why we are emphasizing it is for the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, Professor Kindiki Kithure, to lead from the front on this one. I think this is one sector that he can actually draw a lot of benefit if he engages correctly and in a very positive way. Remember, he himself, at one point, he was part of this this sector, and therefore it's a sector that most of he will be very proud about to work with.